On September 3, 2007, one of the world's most accomplished adventurers took off from a Nevada ranch for what should have been a routine pleasure flight. Steve Fossett, the man who held more world records than any other living person, climbed into a single-engine plane and disappeared into the vast American wilderness. What followed was one of the largest search and rescue operations in U.S. history. 20,000 square miles scoured by aircraft, satellites, and ground teams. Yet for over a year, it was as if the Earth had simply swallowed him whole. Then, in October 2008, a hiker stumbled upon something extraordinary in the remote California wilderness: 3 identification cards bearing Fossett's name and a pile of $100 bills scattered in the bushland. This discovery would reignite the search and lead to a grisly revelation about what really happened to the legendary record breaker. Before we dive into this case, make sure to like this video and subscribe. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. This is the mystery of Steve Fossett's final flight, a tale that combines cutting-edge aviation, wilderness survival, and the unforgiving nature of the Sierra Nevada mountains that would claim one of history's greatest adventures. Steve Fossett was not your average pilot. By September 2007, this 63-year-old millionaire businessman had accumulated more world records than any other person in history. 116 official records across aviation, sailing, and land speed categories. He was the first person to fly solo around the world in a balloon, the first to fly solo around the world in a plane without refueling, and had set numerous sailing records across the world's oceans. Fossett was a man who lived for the thrill of pushing boundaries and conquering the impossible. On the morning of September 3, 2007, Fossett was staying at the Flying M Ranch in Nevada, owned by hotel magnate Baron Hilton. The ranch, located about 70 miles southeast of Reno, served as a private airstrip and playground for wealthy aviation enthusiasts. Fossett had been there for several days, taking short flights and enjoying the freedom that came with having access to multiple aircraft in one of America's most scenic flying regions. That Monday morning, Fossett announced his plans for what he described as a simple pleasure flight. He intended to take off in a single-engine Balanca Super Decathlon, a nimble aerobatic aircraft perfect for recreational flying in the mountainous terrain of Nevada and eastern California. The plan was straightforward: a few hours of flying over the spectacular landscape, perhaps scouting locations for future land speed record attempts in the dry lake beds that dotted the region. At approximately 9 a.m., Fossett taxied the blue and white Balanca to the ranch's dirt airstrip. The weather conditions were ideal: clear skies, light winds, and unlimited visibility across the high desert landscape. He had not filed a formal flight plan, which was not unusual for such short recreational flights from private airstrips. The expectation was that he would return by lunchtime, as was typical for his morning flying excursions. Hours passed without any word from Fossett. By afternoon, concern began to mount at the Flying M Ranch. Fossett was known for his punctuality and careful attention to detail, traits that had kept him alive through decades of high-risk adventures. When he failed to return by evening, ranch personnel knew something was seriously wrong. The initial response was swift but localized. Ranch staff contacted nearby airports and aviation facilities, hoping Fossett had simply diverted to another location due to weather or mechanical issues. They checked with fixed-base operators throughout Nevada and eastern California, but no one had seen the distinctive Balanca or its famous pilot. By nightfall on September 3rd, it became clear that Steve Fossett and his aircraft had vanished somewhere in the vast wilderness of the American West. The disappearance sent shockwaves through the aviation community. Here was a man who had conquered the globe's most challenging flying conditions, who had navigated solo flights across oceans and continents, yet he had seemingly disappeared on a routine flight over familiar territory. The irony was not lost on those who knew Fossett. The man who had cheated death countless times in record-breaking attempts had vanished during what should have been the safest flight of his career. Within hours of Fossett's failure to return, The Civil Air Patrol launched what would become one of the most extensive search and rescue operations in American history. The search area was staggering, covering portions of Nevada, California, and Utah, across terrain that ranged from high desert to towering mountain peaks reaching over 14,000 feet. The challenge was immense, finding a small, single-engine aircraft somewhere in 20,000 square miles of some of the most rugged wilderness in North America. The search effort mobilized resources from multiple agencies and organizations. The Nevada National Guard deployed helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft, while the California National Guard joined from the west. The U.S. Air Force contributed high-altitude surveillance aircraft, and NASA provided satellite imagery. Civilian volunteers flew hundreds of hours in private aircraft, methodically covering grid patterns across the search zone. On the ground, teams of searchers combed through accessible areas, particularly around airports and emergency landing strips where Fossett might have attempted a forced landing. Technology played a crucial role in the search efforts. Satellites scanned the terrain for any sign of aircraft wreckage or emergency signals. The search teams had access to Fossett's flight history and knew his preferences for certain types of terrain and landmarks. They focused heavily on dry lake beds, which Fossett often used for land speed record attempts and which would provide suitable emergency landing sites for a pilot in distress. The aviation community rallied around the search effort with unprecedented support. Fellow record setters, aviation enthusiasts, and complete strangers donated time, aircraft, and resources to find the missing adventurer. The search became a testament to the tight-knit nature of the flying community, where pilots look out for one another regardless of fame or fortune. As days turned into weeks, theories began to emerge about what might have happened. Some speculated about mechanical failure, others about weather conditions that could have developed rapidly in the mountainous terrain. Fossett's experience level made pilot error seem unlikely, but the unforgiving nature of mountain flying meant that even the most skilled aviators could be caught off guard by downdrafts, turbulence, or rapidly changing conditions. The search teams encountered their own challenges as they combed through the wilderness. The terrain was often inaccessible to ground crews, requiring dangerous helicopter insertions into remote locations. Weather conditions in the high country could change rapidly, grounding aircraft for days at a time. The vastness of the search area meant that even with sophisticated technology and hundreds of volunteers, large sections remained uncovered. Despite the massive effort, weeks passed without any concrete leads. False alarms were frequent. Reflective objects that appeared to be aircraft wreckage from the air, emergency locator transmitters from other crashed aircraft, and witness reports that led searchers to remote locations only to find nothing. The wilderness was keeping its secret, and Steve Fossett remained missing without a trace. For over a year, the mystery of Steve Fossett's disappearance remained unsolved. The massive search operation had been scaled back, then eventually suspended, leaving his fate as one of aviation's most puzzling, unsolved cases. In February 2008, a Chicago judge had declared Fossett legally dead, but his family, friends, and the aviation community continued to wonder what had happened to the legendary adventurer. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source and in an unexpected way. In late September 2008, more than a year after Fossett's disappearance, a hiker was exploring the remote wilderness west of Mammoth Lakes in California's Inyo National Forest. This area, characterized by rugged terrain, dense forests, and steep mountain slopes, had been searched multiple times during the initial rescue operation, but its vastness and difficult accessibility meant that many areas received only cursory attention. As the hiker made his way through the mountainous terrain, something unusual caught his eye. Scattered among the rocks and vegetation were 3 identification cards, all bearing the name Steve Fossett. Nearby, even more remarkable, was a pile of $100 bills, cash that had somehow survived over a year in the harsh mountain environment. The discovery was so unexpected and significant that the hiker immediately contacted authorities. The identification cards and money triggered an immediate response from search teams. Madera County Sheriff John Anderson coordinated a renewed search effort focused on the area where the items had been found. The discovery suggested that Fossett's aircraft had indeed crashed somewhere in the vicinity, and that wreckage might finally be located after more than a year of fruitless searching. Within days of the renewed search effort, the breakthrough investigators had been hoping for finally materialized. Search teams located the wreckage of a small aircraft in an isolated patch of eastern California, embedded in a mountainside at approximately 10,000 feet elevation. The terrain was extremely rugged and difficult to access, which explained why the crash site had remained hidden despite the extensive previous search efforts. The aircraft wreckage was positively identified as Fossett's Balanca Super Decathlon through registration numbers and other identifying features. The impact site told a devastating story. The aircraft had struck the mountainside with tremendous force, indicating that Fossett had likely died instantly upon impact. The remote location and steep terrain explained why the crash had gone undetected for so long, despite the massive search operation that had covered the general area. The discovery location was particularly telling about the challenges that had faced the original search teams. The crash site was in an area that appeared accessible from aerial searches, but was actually hidden by the terrain's topography and dense forest cover. From above, the wreckage would have been extremely difficult to spot, camouflaged by the natural environment and broken into pieces that scattered across the mountainside. Investigation of the wreckage provided insights into the final moments of Fossett's flight. The aircraft had struck the mountain at a steep angle, suggesting either a loss of control or an attempt to avoid terrain in deteriorating conditions. Weather records from the day of the disappearance were reviewed to understand what conditions Fossett might have encountered in his final moments, though the exact cause of the crash remained under investigation. The discovery of Fossett's aircraft wreckage marked the beginning of a careful forensic investigation that would piece together the final chapter of the adventurer's life. The crash site, located in an extremely remote section of the Sierra Nevada mountains, presented unique challenges for investigators who had to be transported to the location by helicopter due to the inaccessible terrain. Initial examination of the wreckage confirmed that the impact had been catastrophic. The Balanca Super Decathlon had struck the mountainside with such force that it was scattered across a wide area, with pieces of the aircraft embedded in rocks and trees. The severity of the impact led investigators to conclude that Fossett had most likely died instantly, sparing him from suffering in the remote wilderness. However, one crucial element was missing from the crash site: Fossett's remains. While the wreckage clearly indicated a fatal crash, searchers found no human remains in or immediately around the aircraft. This absence puzzled investigators and launched a secondary search effort focused specifically on locating Fossett's body. Teams expanded their search pattern around the crash site, looking for any evidence of the pilot's fate. The mystery of the missing remains was solved through a grim discovery that highlighted the harsh realities of the wilderness environment. About half a mile east of the crash site, searchers found 2 large human bones along with personal items that definitively belonged to Fossett. Among the items recovered were his tennis shoes and his Illinois driver's license and credit cards, all bearing distinctive animal bite marks that told a disturbing story. Sheriff John Anderson explained the evidence to media outlets. This reinforces our theory that animals dragged him away. The discovery painted a sobering picture of what had occurred after the crash. Wildlife in the Sierra Nevada includes bears, coyotes, and other scavengers that would naturally be attracted to a crash site. The bite marks on Fossett's personal belongings and the distance between the crash site and where his remains were found indicated that his body had been moved by animals seeking food. The bones were immediately sent to a Department of Justice testing laboratory for DNA analysis to provide absolute confirmation of identity. While the personal items found with the remains strongly suggested they belonged to Fossett, the scientific confirmation was necessary for legal and family closure purposes. Previous bone fragments discovered during earlier searches had proven to be either non-human or too degraded for testing, making this discovery crucial for resolving the case. The forensic analysis also examined other evidence found at both the crash site and the secondary location where the remains were discovered. The $100 bills found by the original hiker had scattered from the aircraft during the crash, creating the trail that led to the discovery. The money's survival in the wilderness environment for over a year demonstrated both the durability of modern currency and the dry conditions that had helped preserve other evidence. Investigation into the cause of the crash continued as authorities examined the aircraft's maintenance records, weather conditions on the day of the crash disappearance, and Fossett's flight experience. The challenging terrain where the crash occurred was known for creating dangerous flying conditions, including downdrafts and rapidly changing weather that could catch even experienced pilots off guard. The 10,000-foot elevation of the crash site was within the aircraft's operating capabilities, but the mountainous terrain posed inherent risks for single-engine aircraft operations. The recovery operation itself proved challenging, requiring multiple helicopter flights to remove evidence and remains from the remote location. The successful completion of this operation brought closure to one of aviation's most perplexing mysteries. The DNA analysis results confirmed what investigators had suspected. The bones, found half a mile from the crash site, were indeed those of Steve Fossett. This scientific confirmation brought official closure to a case that had captivated the aviation world and the general public for over a year. The legendary adventurer's family finally had the answers they needed, though the circumstances of his final moments remained a stark reminder of the risks inherent in aviation, even for the world's most experienced pilots. Peggy Fossett, Steve's widow, issued a statement acknowledging the discovery as another step in the process of completing the investigation into the tragic accident that took Steve's life. Her measured response reflected both the relief of finally having answers and the ongoing grief of losing a husband whose life had been defined by pushing the boundaries of human achievement. The family had endured more than a year of uncertainty, hoping against hope that Steve might somehow have survived, and the definitive evidence brought a painful but necessary end to that chapter. The resolution of Fossett's disappearance had significant implications for search and rescue operations in remote wilderness areas. The case highlighted both the capabilities and limitations of modern search technology. Despite deploying satellites, aircraft, and hundreds of searchers across 20,000 square miles, the initial search had failed to locate the crash site. The eventual discovery came through the chance finding of personal items by a recreational hiker, underscoring how luck often plays a crucial role in resolving missing person cases in vast wilderness areas. Aviation safety experts studied the case to understand how an experienced pilot like Fossett could have fallen victim to conditions that he had successfully navigated countless times before. The crash location, at 10,000 feet in mountainous terrain known for turbulent conditions, served as a reminder that mountain flying presents unique challenges even for the most skilled aviators. The National Transportation Safety Board's investigation focused on whether weather conditions, mechanical failure, or other factors had contributed to the accident. The search operation itself became a case study in resource coordination and volunteer mobilization. The aviation community's response to Fossett's disappearance demonstrated the tight bonds that exist among pilots, regardless of their fame or achievements. The massive volunteer effort, involving hundreds of private aircraft and thousands of flight hours donated by civilian pilots, showed how the flying community takes care of its own. Sheriff John Anderson announced that authorities had completed their groundwork and would not be resuming search efforts, bringing official closure to the case. The remote crash site was left largely undisturbed, serving as an unintentional memorial to one of history's most accomplished adventurers in one of the world's most challenging environments. The case also prompted discussions about flight planning and emergency locator beacons for recreational flights in remote areas. While Fossett's experience level was beyond question, his disappearance highlighted the importance of proper communication and tracking procedures, even for short pleasure flights. Steve Fossett's final flight serves as a profound reminder that nature remains the ultimate arbiter of human ambition, regardless of experience, preparation, or past achievements. Here was a man who had conquered the world's oceans, circumnavigated the globe in aircraft and balloons, and set more world records than any other person in history. Yet, in the end, it was a routine pleasure flight over familiar territory that claimed his life, demonstrating the humbling truth that the wilderness recognizes no exceptions. The year-long mystery of his disappearance revealed both the power and limitations of modern search technology. Despite unprecedented search efforts involving military resources, satellite imagery, and hundreds of volunteers, it took a chance discovery by a recreational hiker to finally solve the puzzle. This reality check about our technological capabilities serves as an important lesson for both aviation safety and search and rescue operations. Fossett's story also highlights the importance of the human element in solving mysteries. The hiker who found his identification cards and the searchers who methodically followed up on that discovery succeeded where sophisticated technology had failed. Sometimes the most important breakthroughs come from basic human observation and persistence rather than advanced equipment. The tragic end to Fossett's remarkable life reminds us that every adventure, no matter how routine it might seem, carries inherent risks. His willingness to push boundaries and explore the limits of human achievement inspired millions, but it also came with a price that he ultimately paid in the remote mountains of California. Perhaps most importantly, Fossett's legacy extends beyond his records and achievements to include the way the aviation community rallied around the search for him. The massive volunteer effort demonstrated the bonds that unite pilots and adventurers, showing that the true measure of a person isn't just in their individual accomplishments, but in how they inspire others to care and contribute. If this case moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more investigative stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What lessons do you take from Steve Fossett's final adventure? In the end, Steve Fossett lived as he died, pushing forward into the unknown, accepting risks that others wouldn't dare take, and reminding us all that the greatest adventures often come with the greatest stakes.